Hello, and welcome to Los Altos History. I'm Patricia Smith, and tonight our guest is Los Alton Barbara McCarthy. In 1982, Barbara and her husband Tom purchased an 1898 farmhouse located at 39 Pine Lane in Los Altos. Barbara proceeded to do something that many of us have thought about doing, but don't have the knowledge or the time to do. She researched the history of her home. Tonight, Barbara's with us, and she's going to tell us how maybe some of us could do that if we have an interest in it. Welcome to our show, Barbara.
Thank you.
We have some footage of your house, and I thought it would be interesting for our viewers to see it. So why don't we take a walk? Let's take a walk through about a minute worth of the footage on Pine Lane, and Barbara will tell us what we're seeing. Barbara, why don't you tell us what we're seeing here in this footage?
Okay, we're looking at the front entry to the home right now, next to the oak tree, which is estimated to be about 500 years old.
Oh, it's lovely.
And that's the side of the house. That's the back. Originally, the home was built on 15 acres, but it's been reduced through all the subdivisions down to 1/3 of an acre. Mm-hmm. Now, you can see those are some add-on porches that were probably built on around 1910. A sleeping porch over the kitchen. Initially, those windows were screened, and then the windows were added later. You can see the pipes for the plumbing and also for the electricity, which were added on after the house was built as well. That's a side porch.
Beautiful window there.
Thank you. That's in the bathroom, downstairs bathroom. Kitchen porch again, coming back around to the front.
Now, this was built about 1898 originally, but you have done some work on it, and we'll talk about that later.
That's right.
Okay.
You can see some of the porch we did add on, reenacted or reconstructed what we had seen in some photos taken at an earlier time.
Now, the oak tree, the proximity to the house, do you think it was built there for that reason?
My husband guesses that it was built there because it gave a natural air conditioning effect to the house, and it never gets over 70 degrees in the house, even in the hottest season.
Yeah.
Provides a lot of shade.
When I was out there, the tree is all wired and cemented, and I guess a tree that old, you just have to be very careful with it. It's about 500 years old.
It could be that old, yeah.
It's amazing. Why don't we talk first about how you researched the house, and then later on we'll talk about some of the work you've done on the house and who the people were and their relation to Los Altos history. Why did you take this on to begin with? Were these people that you knew that lived there, or are you a history buff, or how did this all come about?
No, we were just looking for a home to move into, and we had appreciated in the past homes that had an older character to them, some individuality. And we wanted to recreate that warmth and that charm in a home of our own. And so we had found this home. We recognized that it had potential, which is a key word when you see a home that may have gone to disrepair over the years, or not a unified character, so we wanted to take that on and unify the character.
So when you did the restoration, you're not trying to restore it to a turn-of-the-century period piece, so to speak. You want the flavor, but you want it to be a modern home.
That's exactly right. You can't go back to a home and, as we were talking about, take out the plumbing or take out the electricity and all that, but just at least working with the moldings and the millwork and trying to capture some of the flavor of what was there when the house was built, just unifying the character throughout.
Okay, now what exactly spurred you on to do this research, because there's a lot of work involved, and Barbara will be telling us some of the things she had to go through. It's an ongoing process. How long has it taken you since you first moved in?
We moved in about 6 years ago, and we started at that time. The history research was done so that we could try and dig up, and we did successfully, find some pictures of the old home and how some of the architectural style had been removed over the years by the different owners. The house had changed owners about every 10 years, and so people would come in and they would add and do what was modern at that time, you know, which was fine, but there was no unification of style throughout the home when we moved in.
Oh, that's
so that was what spurred us on to do the history search, is to find out from people and pictures what had been there before.
Did they leave anything when you moved in? Were there albums or anything from the owners that you bought it from, or perhaps, I don't know, graffiti on the wall or anything that just gave you a hint of where to start? Or did you know this through reading, or how did you even know where to start? So many people want to do this and they don't really know what to do.
You're right. The only thing that we had was one sheet of paper which listed their best guess that the house was built in 1908, and they had given me the name of one man they had spoken with who had lived in the house in the 1920s, along with a phone number. So contacting him, you got a little bit of information, but in calling the city and calling the history house and talking to the persons in the neighborhood that may have had some information, they led me on to the assessor's office at the county. And starting with the tax records is where you really start your in-depth research.
Oh, okay.
So looking
that's
back
just
in the
it's like a huge puzzle that just starts fitting together, I guess.
Mhm.
Pine Lane is in an older section of Los Altos, so I imagine there would be people, maybe their families had been there for quite a while, so that would have helped. Now, when you say the assessor's office, is that Santa Clara County assessor?
Yes, down on Heading.
On Heading.
70 West Heading.
Okay, now do you have to make an appointment to see this person? You just go into the office and tell them your address, and you have access to the files.
You take your parcel number from your property tax bill,
Okay.
and that starts the process, and they'll go back through their records and show you as much as they can. I'm not sure when they started assessing property taxes, and so if you know the last owner that the house had, then you can go downstairs into the record books, work with the microfiche files, and look up the old grantors and grantees.
And they allow you, just as a private citizen, to do this? You don't have any special training or anything? They just allow you to do that?
And they're helpful to show you what you need to do.
Okay.
It's a time-consuming process.
Yes. Oh, I know it is. It's tremendous. You've done it. Yes. Now, as far as like fees, are there fees for it, or it's free to taxpaying
There is no
citizens?
charge to look through the information. What you want to have a copy of, they will Xerox, and it may have been 50 cents or $1 per copy.
All right. So that told you perhaps the owners of the house through the years. What else does that tell you, that kind of information?
You can cross-reference some of the information in those books to things we were able to find in a estate settlement, which gave you an account of the first owner's will, which kind of gave you an insight into his lifestyle to see the type of things he had at his death. You can cross-reference old maps, subdivision maps.
Okay. Were there any books or anything you could recommend to people? I know you mentioned an article that was very good in a magazine. Any other suggestions for people? I guess your local history group would be of help. How about City Hall in your own city?
City Hall maintains some records. Los Altos records are not that old, but surprisingly enough, the house that we're living in, when it was built, was considered part of Mountain View.
Oh, I see.
So never forget to go to an adjacent city
Very
or
good
town,
point, especially in this area.
right,
Yeah.
and check their records.
Now, you said that they estimated that the house was built in 1908, but you found out that it was built even before that, 1898, and that was just through the county assessor's
Right, and through the
office?
records and tracing the property owners
Oh, that's
as
really
far back as we could.
Yeah. Now, what about the photographs? How did you come about? We have a number of photographs we're going to be seeing tonight about the family and interesting photographs of the area. How did you come by those? I think that's a real treasure that happened.
Yeah, that was a great story. The second family to live there was the name of Carruthers, and they had purchased a home in 1905, and they lived there until 1914. And they had been very friendly with the Urban family, which had lived up the road. And speaking with so many people in the city of Los Altos and up at History House, and it may have been Pinky Whalen who gave me the name to contact the Urbans, just because they're well-known old-timers in the area. Coincidentally, they had 2 photo albums that the Carruthers family had left with them.
Oh.
And it detailed pictures of the house, the San Antonio Club in the neighborhood, and some other local events as well, just a lifestyle of the day.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about the Carruthers. You said they're the second owners. Do you know anything about the builders, the original owners?
The only family that I was able to trace down that lived there before was a family by the name of Hoskins, James and Araminta Hoskins, who came then to Mountain View, although we know it as Los Altos, in 1898, because their son Leander Hoskins was a Stanford professor and had purchased the land in 1893.
Oh, I see.
I don't know that the house was there before then. They probably built it when they came in 1898.
Yeah. And you said that there were many owners through the years. I wonder why that is. It was your typical farmhouse with 15 acres, probably fruit trees.
Prune primarily.
Prune. And Carruthers, I know the second owner was also a Stanford person.
He was a Stanford student, and then he became a lawyer.
Oh, I see.
So he wasn't the orchardist that the Hoskins were, so he must have farmed out the land to other people.
Yeah, very interesting. She also did something that I think most people, again, don't take the time to do, put together a beautiful album here. It has the historical photos and the photos of the remodeling also, and of course it's fascinating to see these people because they were so tied in with the early Los Altos history. The Carruthers were somehow tied into the Adams family. Do you want to explain that? And the Adams family built the home at 55 Pepper Drive, which was the first historical landmark here in Los Altos, first designated home. And that's still there. It's a beautiful old home. But could you tell us what the tie-in between Carruthers and Adams is?
As far as I know, when I was speaking with Marvin Adams Jr., I believe it was, on the phone several years ago, he told me that his family, when coming to the area, had stayed in this particular house with the Carruthers family, which was just within 2 to 3 days before the 1906 earthquake. And at that time, they moved over to Pepper where they built their own home. So they were, and it was his son, I believe, Earl Adams, who ended up marrying Agnes Urban.
Oh, who are the people that have helped you so much.
Right,
yeah.
right.
Now, Earl Adams, there's a wonderful picture of a print shop. And can we assume maybe that was their business? They were printers? Or?
I would guess so. That I didn't know much about. It was a lovely picture, detailing the lifestyle at that time.
Yeah. The other thing about the Adams and the Carruthers, they had something to do with the San Antonio Club, which was the first social, cultural center for Los Altons. And another family that ties into that, the San Antonio Club, when it was built, were the Smiths. And the Smiths, of course, were J. Gilbert Smith, who was the owner of, and builder of History House, which is our city museum. So see all these people start tying in. It's just amazing. Yeah. Did you find any other families or anything else that tied in as you went along? Was the house passed on from generation to generation, or just totally different owners all the way through?
Apparently, it has just been passed on to separate owners. You didn't see any family members, except possibly one in the 50s. But nothing historically significant that we came up with.
Do you think that you'll eventually apply for historical designation like the Smith House or the Adams House?
It would be interesting, you know, to pursue. I don't know that the house has quite that much significance to the town, perhaps as all this research does, just to spur some of the viewers on.
Yeah, I think the significance would probably be the architectural significance.
Yeah, because
although it has been altered a fair amount. You weren't the first to alter it.
No.
Throughout the years, it was altered quite a bit.
Right.
Yeah. Are there fruit trees on the property now? I don't remember seeing.
Not many to be seen.
Yeah. What is the acreage that you have now?
About 1/3 acre.
1/3 of an acre.
Yeah.
So it's dwindled down from 15 to, yeah. It's a funny thing because you drive down Pine Lane, and it's a residential area. I mean, homes that were built certainly much later, and then you turn into this driveway, and there's this little slice of Los Altos history sitting there. It's really quite a beautiful home. You've done a real nice job. Why don't we talk a little bit now about the restoration that you've done. Again, you didn't choose to try to restore it as a period house, a turn-of-the-century house. You have taken bits and pieces and done such a beautiful job. It's been a real undertaking there, too.
Yes.
Yeah. And did you know anything about it? How to go about doing that?
One thing that was quite helpful to us was that we took some courses through the Owner Builder Center. And they give you a lot of information as to how to go about remodeling a house.
Did you have structural problems with such an old house? termites, dry rot, anything like that?
Well, the thing that's most interesting, they used redwood quite a lot when they built the older homes, and so there really wasn't much termite damage to speak of. We had found a little dry rot later, but that was just to some remodelings over the years that may not have been done as well as they should have. But the homes at that time were not built on the foundations as we know them today. They were built on brick.
Oh, I see. So what is the foundation of the house now?
Well, the brick is still there, but we used a technique, I believe they called it sistering, in which you would add a concrete wall around it and some earthquake bolts, although the house withstood the '06 earthquake, and it didn't fall off the brick foundations.
Right. Well, you really did a lot of work then. You and your husband weren't the only ones then. Did you have contractors come in, or?
We would have some friends and some people that knew what they were doing in terms of...
Well, you have really undertaken a lot with this house. You know, your heart is really in it. Huh? When you started to take it apart, did you find anything of interest, maybe something hidden, or I know when they did the San Antonio school, they found wonderful notes in the back of the fireplaces and things like that. Did you find any little gems that you've saved?
Nothing extremely significant. A newspaper clipping from, I can't remember what year, maybe 20s or 30s, a little bit of a newspaper clipping, and some nails in the floor. I think they used a square head nails.
You have those right here in her photo album. She has two rusty but still intact square head nails.
They don't use these days.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Why don't you tell us what exactly you did? I know that the front has been altered drastically because a photo we have has a very small front porch, although my guess is that the original front porch was probably a veranda type porch. I think that was something that those people did a lot, sit out on the porch after a hard day's work.
I think
you now have a beautiful front porch, but in the one photo I know it was a very small area, so you have changed the outside a fair amount.
Yes, we tried to bring that back to the style that we'd seen in some earlier pictures. Maybe not when the house was first built, but as a pretty early add-on. That type of veranda, I suspect, was put on. But our first thing to do was to repair the foundation, because we figured, like anything, you start with a good foundation and work your way up. So that was the first thing that we did. And then trying to keep the rest of it in good repair. After we worked on the porch a bit, we had to put on a new roof, gutter system, and a paint job, and tried to work from the bottom up and from the outside in. And we worked a little bit on some of the rooms, and there's quite a lot more to do. Yeah.
What about like plumbing, things like plumbing? I know you have a beautifully restored bathroom with an old tub. Was that something that you bought new, or
that was a salvage item?
Go out and salvage things?
It was a salvage item. Found someone that could re-porcelain the tub for us and paint it. We didn't modify the plumbing to the house itself. Everything really was working very well when we moved in. It was perhaps more an aesthetic type of thing with us.
Were you on septic tank, or had it already been reverted to plumbing?
It had been to plumbing quite some years, maybe 20 or 30 years ago. It went from septic tank onto the sewer system.
The other thing I noticed in going through the house is the beautiful windows, but you put them in, the leaded windows, and of course your front door has a lovely, and you did that yourself. So there wasn't really anything, it was really a typical farmhouse. There wasn't really anything very luxurious about it, I gather.
That's probably true. When the homes were built, they were working homes. And as owners have come in, they've tried to update them and modernize them to current specifications.
Yeah, I can imagine. What about cost? Is this something that you planned long-term to do, or do you recommend people to try to do this kind of thing, or are you piecemealing as far as?
I guess you'd say we're piecemealing. You should see some people now are taking homes that are not too old and they're knocking them down entirely, and they're putting a lot of money into remodels. But with us, we're kind of piecemealing it as we go. You have to have kind of an open mind, because you really don't know what you're going to find when you open an older wall when you have no plans.
And you did find a lot of dry rot.
In the front porch area we did, with the overhang, and we didn't suspect it was there, and just opening up a wall to do a little bit of work precluded tearing out the whole front of the home and the porch, but it was fun.
I
have to say that it was
now it's fun because
it's a learning experience.
Now, were there any other structures on the property? There was a photo of a water tank. Did that belong to the Carruthers or the people that lived there? That was
apparently the tank house was if you're looking at the front of the house, it would be just off to the right where the tank house was located. That's now where our neighbor's house is. That may have been removed in the 1930s, I think. There was also a little structure that's on another neighbor's property now, and we were told it may be a fruit drying shed, which was used at one time. And something quite interesting too, the old building, I think we have a picture of the horse and carriage going back to it, was a carriage house, which has been converted as another home on Tommy Leah, which is a block over from our home.
Oh, is that right?
And that was the carriage house originally. Because with 15 acres, you had a lot of
Sure, it would be 15 acres out. Maybe it wasn't moved. It was originally there. Yeah, yeah. The lifestyle was so different. And yeah, I'm trying to think of what that area was like at that time. Do you have any photos showing the area? Were there a lot of homes around there? Or we know the San Antonio Club, of course, is right there on San Antonio, and that was built about 1908, as I remember.
Right.
By the people of Los Altos as a cultural center. They needed someplace to go. And in that area, there are a number of older homes. Any aerial views showing?
No.
Yeah, it's got to be one of the first, I would think.
In that particular area.
Yeah, yeah.
I would think.
Yeah. I thought maybe we could just sort of glance through this to see if there's anything that you know, strikes you as far as the work you did. One thing, of course, I noticed was the beautiful hardwood floors, and those you did yourself.
They used fir floors a lot in that era, but sometimes they're not milling the fir floors to the same width that they are now.
Yeah.
Or I should say they're making them a little thinner now, so it's really hard to get reproduction materials. One interesting fact, there was a home that was recently torn down about half a block away from our home, which was the old Kendall home, I believe, and it was built in somewhere between 1905 and 1907. I can't remember. And they had given us permission to go in and salvage some of their doors and their millwork for over the doorways and the windows because it was the exact style of what we have in our home. And we had taken some of the old moldings down to a mill shop and had reproduced them. Okay.
Well, now maybe you could tell our audience how you go about doing something like that. When she talks about milling and this kind of thing, it's the molding that goes around the doors, and they're actually milled. You can probably tell them a lot more about it than I can. Are there specialists that do this, or is it something you just knew about, or how did you go about doing this?
Well, if you pick up some publications, the one that's really quite good is Historic Preservation. It's the publication from the National Trust for Historic Preservation.
Oh, yes.
And they showcase homes occasionally, and they have a lot of ads in the back that refer you to persons that do that kind of work. There's a wonderful shop in San Francisco called San Francisco Victoriana, and they have so many things from the San Francisco Victorians, much more elaborate even than you would see in a farmhouse style, such as we have. And they will either mill something to your specification if they don't carry exactly what you have, and chances are they may have something right in stock.
Oh, that's good. And you know, resource. I think there are some books, now that I'm thinking about magazines, architectural books perhaps, that are just on your newsstand. House Beautiful, some of those magazines in the back, there's just all kinds of places that do this kind of thing. So that would be another source for people to look at, yeah. What about the library? Any help with the library?
The libraries were quite good. The Mountain View Library in particular has a history room, and that and the San Jose Library and the Santa Clara Library, you can get lists of directories of the old people that used to reside in the area. You can get phone directories when the phones were started.
Helps
oh,
piece it all together.
Yeah.
Now, we all know a woman's work is never done. What did your husband do about all this? Her husband is Tom, and I'm sure he had something to do with this.
With the whole project?
Yes.
We had equal input into, we had very similar tastes, and that seems to really help.
Helped.
Yeah.
And when you first bought the home, you told me the story about how you went back. You were there, and then you'd go look at other homes, and it sort of drew you there. Yeah.
It did, because of the warmth and the charm, as I told you, of a building of that era. And because of the work involved, we saw that, as I told, that other keyword, potential, that not everybody sees in a place. And so the home was on the market for a while, but I think it scared off a lot of people that knew they didn't either have the time or the ambition to take on a project.
Well, like I said, you not only restored it, refurbished, you're still in the process. We're still in the process of doing that. But to do all this research, I know there are a lot of people out there that would like to do this, but it does take time. And were there times when you wanted to give up? Just say, oh, I'm just sick of looking at all this information.
No, never.
And it will never stop because you've got much to do and lots of information there. I see all kinds of things that you've done. Now, what about the people that are living around? Do they come over? People maybe that have been there that have watched this process of what you've done? It's probably a real item in the neighborhood, I would imagine.
Oh, it is. And it's interesting, too, because even 2 or 3 or even 4 of the past owners, anywhere from 1940 up to the most recent, they come by out of the blue and they just ring on the doorbell one day and say, I used to live there. And they will walk you through and they'll show you how the rooms used to be, because different owners after them, of course, would remove walls or add this and that.
Right.
And so you got a feel for how it used to be.
Yeah. Would you do it all again?
Definitely.
You had to do it again? You plan to stay there for quite a while?
The rest of my life.
I can imagine. Like I said, it's a beautiful place. In talking with different people now, were there any special anecdotes that they told? I know you said the one about the Adams family. I know they arrived like 36 hours before the earthquake. What a California arrival, huh? And they stayed there the night before. Any other kind of cute stories that you could relate to as far as your own lives, or maybe someone that lived there that was in the same profession you are? Or?
Off the top, I'm sure I have them. I can't think of them off the top of my head.
How about ghosts? We always get asked in old homes if there are any ghosts or any unusual things or our feelings. None at all?
No.
Yeah. Now, you and your husband, Tom, are you from the area? Is that part of it, that you have this feeling about Los Altos?
Well, I'm from San Francisco. Tom's from Oakland. We both grew up in post-war housing, which
maybe
were
had something to do with
homes,
it, huh?
but plain, and we always appreciated the older type of home which we saw growing up in San Francisco and Oakland. And so we always enjoyed the feel, as I said, going into those type of homes and appreciating the architecture.
Now, does your house have an actual architectural name as far as the design? It's been piecemealed quite a bit, but you really do get the feeling when you drive in. It's a country home, and of course you've chosen the blue and the white, and that oak tree. That's really gorgeous.
The tree is nice. We probably wouldn't want to live there if it wasn't for the tree.
Yeah. Have you had to have a lot of care for that, the tree?
The same family's been caring for it for 40 years, and it doesn't require too much.
A lot of continuity. Well, Barbara, I thank you very much for being here, and I thank you for restoring this house for the future, and a historical designation could be a good idea so that everyone would, be able to enjoy it in the future. And thank you for being here.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for being with us tonight on Los Altos History, and join us again the next time we're on. Good evening to all of you.